We shall start inside. We're going to start from the two lines at the end of the top section. Two lines above the end. The line begins with the word ha'ora.
Kuf Nun Vav.
What?
Kuf Nun Vav.
From the top, okay. Before we go, I want to revisit and be focusing again on the principle of ha'ora. To make it very simple, you have sunlight. The biggest light, the definition of light that there is, sunlight. This sunlight is a powerful light and has a luminary, has a source, endless source, that's constantly rejuvenated every second. With enormous power. To the extent we try to hide from it. Of course, along with it, it also generates heat and so forth. Besides the heat, light also. There's a limit how much light human light can tolerate. The effect of this light is that it brings the entire world to a state of observability. The world cannot hide from the sunlight. Although the world initially, in itself, as the Pasuk says, it does not produce itself. It does not call to be seen. It's an entity that vision, that sight, is in addition to it. It identified by it does make itself known, but by touch, not by sight. But then comes light, sunlight, that brings a new dimension to the world, that of sight. The sight element, that is definitely the effect, not the world, but from the sun, from the light of the sun. In the light itself, the light of the sun itself, it is the subset of the sunlight. Sunlight, there are multiple levels. But basically, from what, especially as we identifying it, we're looking at, it has two levels. It is what the light is at itself, and the effect of its presence on its surrounding. In order that this effect on its surrounding should be usable, functional. We have to have a means of limiting the effect of the presence of the light itself. Otherwise, the light completely outshines, so to speak, overwhelms the effect of its presence. And if the light is there, it blinds you. It doesn't bring things into focus. On the contrary. In other words, in this light, there are two levels. There is the light that presents itself as light. Then there is the ha'ora. There is the aspect of this light that it says, my intent is not just presenting myself as light. I also want to illuminate the world. And in order to illuminate the world, I have to constrain myself. I have to limit my statement of my presence. I have to be present, but I have to limit the emphasis of my presence. I have to allow you to focus on the effect of my presence, not the presence itself. That's called the ha'ora. If you reflect on this ha'ora element, you recognize that this ha'ora has an enormously important function. Its function is to effectuate the value and the significance of light upon the environment where the light is present. In other words, to make light a universal presence, not that it's present in its own in light. It allows it to be universally recognized, universally beneficial. That's the ha'ora element. You take the subset of light, the effect of light, and you limit the focus on light per se. Then this element of light becomes all-encompassing. It embraces the entire world. It brings the entire world to life. Brings the reality of the entire world to experience, to recognize its presence.
If what? If you limit the light?
Yeah, if you limit
The
the
intensity.
emphasis on light per se. This is called the ha'ora. The ha'ora, the effect, the ultimate benefit of ha'ora is that ha'ora embraces all the entire environment. Light cannot embrace. Light remains in itself, whatever it is. It speaks about itself only. Because it's so overwhelmingly powerful. It doesn't allow anything else to be recognized. The ha'ora brings the benefit of light to everything. Thus, revealing and elevating everything to a state of light. It's not a dark world, it's a lit up world. That's the effect of the ha'ora. The Neshama Yisrael I'm step back a bit. We know that we spoke yesterday. I hope it's recorded. I hope we have to take time to listen over it. Adam Kadmon, which is the source of the entire creation. The source of the creation means not that it creates by its own power. The Yeshua created the world, and Adam Kadmon is the means of which that godly creation element comes to the world itself. Adam Kadmon is that level that recognizes, gives cognizance to everything that the world can possibly identify. Thus, Adam Kadmon, if it gives cognizance to everything that world can possibly produce, please understand, it's Adam Kadmon. In other words, it's the world being in perception. It's not the world as it is in its source. It's the world in the perception state. If there is a perception of world, perception brings along with a sense of meaning, of value. Adam Kadmon is what identifies what is this world about. The world is not an automatic presence because there is light, and therefore there is the world. As we said, light per se, in our motion, blinds and it conceals the world. You can't see the world if there is light. Power of light per se. It reveals world, but reveals world on a subset level, so that you see world from an intended perception. Not because it's there, therefore you see it. There's an intent, there's a meaning. Why it's being shown, why do you say, or why am I showing it to you? This is what I'm coming. Why is there a world? The world is not a must be. Godliness is a must be. World is not a must be. World is a godly decision that there should be such a thing. If there's a godly decision there should be such a thing, that means that there is a meaning behind its being. This meaning is contained, is represented by Adam Kadmon. The beginning of existence. Why did existence come into existence? Thus, this Adam Kadmon is contained everything that there is going to be in existence. Because as I said many times, since this is a divine perception, in divine perception, there is nothing that's lacking. Everything possible to be there is there. Thus, Adam Kadmon incorporates and represents and speaks of everything that comes into being in the world. However, it has to be understood all that comes into being in the worldly arena as a result of Adam Kadmon does not come inadvertently. Because there is light, so that comes up. Because we said, if we were to rely on light itself, light would blind your vision. The light has to be presented in a manner that it reveals world, rather than overwhelm it. So Adam Kadmon, as the Rebbe explains, has these two distinct levels. The Kitzonius. The Kitzonius is that which is actually presented to the world, which illuminates and brings guidance into the world in a manner that the world remains world. The world is able to process this godly present light. And there is, since this is not, I said, not in an inadvertent presentation, it's an intended presentation. The intent element, this is called the pneumius hak. What initiated, what aroused the will in Ak to create a world? This is called pneumius hak. This world must be conceptualized within Ak before it creates it. Because I said it doesn't create inadvertently. This conceptualization level of the world, which initiates from nothingness the whole concept of the world, is called pneumius hak. It originates the whole concept. It brings light to the world, not to the existent world, but it brings light that identifies world to begin with. And the Rebbe explains, here is the phenomenal thing. What in fact is in this pneumius hak that arouses it and brings out the significance of bringing it out into full expression, into creation, into revelation. There's nothing compelling Ak to create a world. What is it within Ak, within the conception of Ak itself, that says, I want to create a world? Before I go to the answer directly, since this is not that we are familiar with these things, I want to bring out a very simple, very important principle. Something that is initiated from scratch, from a source, since it is the source that initiates this ultimate creation, therefore it means that this creation is going to be representative of that source at the creation level. We have given many shown for this. I don't want to go back and repeating everything. Pneumius hak is, this is a lakus. And lakus wants to create, but he wants to create that which will represent the lakus, not which will be estranged from the lakus. It is the initiator of the whole creation. But world and lakus are not the same thing. Thus, it means that the lakus has identified in world an aspect that makes sense for the lakus to create that thing. Because that thing will be reflective of a lakus, of what its own truth. This is what's contained in this pneumius hak. the initial impetus to create. And I said, if there's an impetus in the source of creation, it means that the creation will be representative of the source. What in this creation is representative of the source? And this is what the Rebbe explained. The answer is the Shomesh Yisrael. The Shomesh Yisrael will also come into the world. But this is such a presence that in the world it is representative of the Pnimi Isak, of the initial desire to create. They don't become estranged. They not become estranged from their source. Even though they're also in the world, they have seichel and midas and so forth, but their seichel and midas draws them and inspires them to stay connected to their source. This is why they are inspiring, so to speak. They are initiating. The pnimi is to create. Because in that creation, the pnimis itself will be recognized. Via Hashem Yisrael. And this is what we said, Israel, all of b'machshava. Israel, all of b'machshava. They rose up in machshava. Rising up in the Machshava is an allusion to the fact that in the beginning of Machshava, before the Machshava has been fully identified, it was projected that there's going to be such a thing as Israel. And that is what enables, what inspires, or justifies to continue and create. Since that this is what initiates all creation, to continue and create, and the principle in this is that Yisrael and the Shomesh Yisrael, even after they come into the world, they become part of the world, they are still remain connected, and they're still drawing and still turning to their source to identify themselves. They're not elements in the world that identify themselves by worldly parameters. Somebody's going to say, where am I coming from? That's who I am. Now the Krus, when I was conceptualized, this is what I am after I'm after I've come into the world. Thus, in the Shomesh Yisrael, even after that they are present, given a presence in the world, they are still connected and representative of Pnimi Isak, of the Krus. Because that they are representative of the Krus even after they are in the world. This is why their presence in the world and their activity in the world is totally different than the world justifies. The world says, no, build up a world. The Shomesh Yisrael says, no, I want to stay connected to the source. And my function, my intent over here is to bring the source, to reveal this source in the world. To limit the worldly effect. To make the world, to transform the world into a godly presence. This is what I am. Neshama Yisrael in the world represents not only godliness, but representing the intent to transform the world into a godly presence. And because of this ha'ora, this effect of the godliness in the Neshama Yisrael, this is why they have the capability and they have the union that they stay connected to Elokus under all circumstances, in all aspects. And they have the ability to work against the world and to transform the world. And they have the personal and cognizance and dedication to completely give up their mitzias in order to reveal Elokus in the world. This Elokus Neshomis revealed in the world is what's called the ha'ora of Elokus, because the atom in the Elokus is Leviathan. But it is also brought out in the world in the form of godly light, and the Neshomis Yisrael are dedicated to this, to bring this godly light to permeate the final creation of the world. They cannot divorce themselves from this light, even though they're in the world. They cannot acquiesce to living a worldly existence because they are in the world, because they remain connected. They represent this ha'ora of Elokus. This ha'ora of Elokus, I said, the ha'ora permeates a whole being, the whole being. It is not something that you observe. This is something which permeates the whole being. And this is why they stay in the world, but they are in the world itself. They remain aloof to the world. They identify themselves not with the world, but with the ha'ora Elokis. This is why there's a union from Mesiras Nefesh, the PALTIEL, of total dedication of Avodas Hashem to Avodas Hashem and Neshama Yisrael. Total dedication. Even though this ha'ora itself is behelen, because they are brought down into the world and they have worldly faculties, but underneath their personal sense of reality is this ha'ora Elokis. They do not identify reality with the world, they identify reality with the ha'ora Elokis, even though they are in the world. This is called the ha'ora. I've explained before the union for ha'ora is. Ha'ora has, even though it's a subset, but it has a tremendous value, effect, because this subset is able to permeate all that exists. Not like oil, can be only where it is nullifies everything. The ha'ora can be within world and illuminates world, and show how world is also godly. And from this, Machshava Akdum Avak is Nimshach, the Rebbe says, okay, at the end of the 3 lines from the bottom, Nimshach ha'ora mishom l'kol echad v'yachad miYisrael. The ha'ora from that divine reality comes to every Yid. Every Yid is cognizant of the ha'ora of Elokus that is the source of all being pure. This is why on the Shomesh Yisrael, no matter under what circumstances, they are constantly connected and recognized in the Elokus. To the extent that they cannot possibly sever that relationship, even if they're threatened with extinction, they remain connected. Because this is what they are. Now, at the bottom, 2 lines from the bottom. This is what's called the Ha'ora V'Lekis in Veitz and the Shomesh Yisrael. The Habitu. But then we also spoke before, the beginning of this whole discussion, that there is an element of bitul that's called B'chol koimo lefonecha tishtachel. Chol koimo lefonecha tishtachel means all existence, all that has an direct presence, bows to you, which means that all everything recognizes, everything in the existence recognizes the bitul to Elokus. Kol koimo, everything. The sky and the earth, everything. So what is the difference between this beetle of Kol and the union that exists between the Shomesh and the Elokus, which is also a union from beetle? What's the difference between these two relationships? The Shomesh is b'pnimius, and they're one with Elokus, and then there is a whole world. Kol koimo lefonecha kol koimo. Everything in the world is lefonecha tishtachel. So we explained. The beetle of Neshomes is because Neshomes are from pnimius. They recognize the pnimius, which means what is the whole initiative of creating the world to begin with. This is where what they connect to. Not what exists in the world, but what is it all about. That's a pnimius, all of Machshava, the pnimius. Pnimius means, why did I create the world? This is what the Shomesh